I'm a 28-year-old male, but when this happened, I was about 23. I worked at a mom and pop's pizza shop in Northern California. It's a small farm town and has a few suburbs near it. I kinda did everything since I knew the family and they trusted me running things while they were gone. This night though, I was working deliveries and got the weirdest one of my life. Everything seemed fine when I took the order, and the lady ordered anchovies on her pizza, and I always think people who order that are weird as shit. She made a point to tell me that the pizza had to be hot when it got there or she wasn't going to pay for it. So I get the pizza and throw it in the warmer and drive to her house before any of my other deliveries. I'd like to tell you guys that her house was creepy and run down, but it looked like your average one-story new housing development home. I rang the doorbell and put on my fake-ass customer service smile. You all know what I'm talking about. And as soon as she opens the door, I knew that this was going to be bad. This haggard old lady, who looked like she was a smoker of 50 plus years, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "It better be hot, or I'm not paying like I told you over the damn phone." "I understand, ma'am. I made sure to stop by your place first, even though it was last on my list. Bring it in and set it on the table." Now, I normally didn't go inside customers' homes because I read way too many stories on No Sleep and Let's Not Meet. But at this point, I'm just wanting to kill her with kindness and see where this will go. So I say, "No problem. I also brought cheese and ranch for you if you need it." As soon as I opened the bag, she just grabbed the box and put her hand on the bottom of it and was just rubbing it. "It's not hot enough. You fuckers do this every time, and I'm not paying for this shit. Not a single dime." One thing I have an issue with is my mouth. I don't know when to just shut up and try to understand where people are coming from. "Look, lady, your house is a 5-minute drive from our shop, and I stopped by your place first. There is no way that your pizza is cold. If you refuse to pay, you're going to be 86th, and I'll note it in your account." She immediately walked into her kitchen and came back out. She had an old pizza from a few weeks prior that she had ordered from us, and she threw it at me. "Take your fucking pizza and get out of my house. You're the devil." She yelled that at me and just kept calling me Satan and the devil. Again, my mouth has no filter and I can't control it. I try, but I fail every time. As I'm closing the bag and laughing about how much I hate my job, I tell her, "Alright ma'am, you will not be able to order pizza from us again. I hope you have a great day. God bless you and your house." She kept following me outside to my car, screaming, "You are the fucking devil." And there are families out there just watching this go down. So I get into my car and start driving. Once I'm back, I tell my manager what happened, and she told me that the lady has already called in and screamed to her about what happened. Her story was that I cussed her out and got her order wrong. My manager shut her down and said I'd never do anything like that. But here's the weird part. She whispered into the phone to my manager and repeated, "Send him back. Send him back. Send him back." She called once a day for almost 3 months, just whispering this to whoever answered. She started driving by the restaurant and yelling, "The devil works here. You're all going to hell." Now, I wasn't scared. I was just pissed and wanted to retaliate, because I can't tell you how many times she actually tried to follow me back to my apartment when I got off of work. One night, I pulled over and got out, just for her to stop her car in the road with her lights on, yelling, "The devil is here." After this, I jumped back in my car and sped off. Luckily, after 6 months of dealing with this lady, I found out she was schizophrenic and bipolar and hadn't been on her meds. Her daughter put her in a care home, but when she was cleaning out her house, she saw that her mom had pictures of me all over her bedroom wall with the word, yep, you guessed it, devil, written all over it. She found me and explained everything to me, and that was pretty much the end of it. I lived in a city in central Ohio that began with a C and had a big college that I lived near. I attended a different college than the one I mentioned, and made the 20-minute drive from the city to that college. I also worked nights as the pizza delivery man in the city and the surrounding suburbs. One night, I had an order in the town where my college is located, which is a smaller suburban city northwest of my home city. Now, this call occurred during what my coworkers and I referred to as the dead hour, which is just before the shop closed at 1 in the morning. I begrudgingly took the pizza, got into my car, and plugged the address into the GPS. I noticed that the house was located off of a back road in what looked like a sparsely populated area. Not thinking much of this, I drove up Route 315 to I-270 East and exited. After passing through downtown, the cemetery, and the college, I drove through some subdevelopments and then onto the smaller road where the house was located. The GPS notified me that I had arrived at my destination, but to my surprise, the house was boarded up. I noticed that there was a small shed in the back of the house that had a small window. I saw a flickering light in the window. At this point, almost every red flag had gone off in my head, but I knew my hard-ass boss would be pissed if I wimped out on this delivery. So I proceeded toward the shed. As I got closer, I heard a rustling in the bushes next to the driveway. Then, I heard a man whisper, "Hey, here they come, Billy. 45, 45. At that point, a man jumped out of the bushes, and 2 other men jumped out of the shed. They were carrying knives and were wearing these long robes and white masks. I made it back to the car just in time, but one of the assailants managed to slice my arm. As I escaped, I could see the assailant standing in the middle of the road. I probably drove 90 miles per hour on the way back. When I got to the shop, everyone looked shocked. After explaining everything to them, we contacted the police and they dispatched a few officers to the house. When they got there, the assailants were, of course, gone. They found some drug paraphernalia in the shed and some ropes. Now, I carry pepper spray. So I work at a pizza place, usually inside, as my insurance doesn't cover claims when driving for business. But occasionally, I will cover a delivery shift for one of the drivers because the money is pretty good. Our delivery area includes a few new development, upper middle class, cookie cutter neighborhoods, an older 1940s era village, 2 apartment complexes, some trailer parks, and a bunch of rural areas. Not rural to the point seeing hundreds of stars at night, but enough that you probably couldn't hear your neighbors yell. So, about a week ago, I was covering a delivery shift. I come back to the shop feeling pretty good. I'm averaging $5 a delivery, and they have all been pretty close, and check to see if I have any more. I have one to an address I've never seen before. We have mostly semi-regular deliveries, so an address that doesn't seem the least bit familiar is odd. It's out on one of the more rural roads. I asked the kid who took the order what was up, because there were special instructions on the ticket. He says, "They said go around back because the front door isn't operational." I'm like, okay, that's not that uncommon. People often want you to go around back. Either they painted the door, the house shifted and it's a bitch to open, or they're just hanging out back. So, as I'm driving out to the house, I get this odd feeling. I don't really like the idea of going to the back of some house out in the sticks. It would all be too easy for some thugs to order a pizza to an abandoned house. There are quite a few in the more rural areas. And then jump the delivery guy. I figure I'll scope the place out when I get there, and if it seems sketchy, I'll just call them and make up some bull about how it's against company policy to go around the back of houses to prevent robberies. As I'm driving to the house, I realize it's towards the end of this road that gets less populated the further down you go. Great. I'm pretty close to the address and driving slow. I see this abandoned-looking house set back from the road with no address and surrounded by a bunch of trees. I think, that house better not be it. So I drive past and check the next house's address, and lo and behold, that abandoned-looking one was the right house. Shit. At this point, I'm not super worried though, because out in the boonies, the standards of upkeep on your house are pretty low, so a house in disrepair isn't unusual. So I double back to this house and pull into the driveway. At this point, I'm getting bad vibes. It just doesn't seem right. So I park my car at the very end of the driveway with the rear of the car on the shoulder so anyone passing by can clearly see it. I call back to the shop and tell them I'm at this sketchy house, and if I don't call back in 4 or 5 minutes, call me, and if I don't answer, call the cops. While I'm on the phone, I take a chance to get a good look at the house. It looks extremely abandoned, and not just in disrepair. The driveway is crumbling, bits of gravel, and there are weeds growing out of it. There's no mailbox, no trash cans, no car, no lawnmowers, no landscaping, kids' toys, absolutely nothing in the yard. The yard hasn't been mowed in what looks like years. The house is total crap. The roof is all but falling apart. The siding is falling apart. The back deck, which comes around the side, is falling apart. The only part of the house that looks even a little bit decent is the allegedly non-functioning front door. The windows are all shut. It's 95 degrees and humid, and this place doesn't have an AC. They all have the blinds or curtains shut. The few that aren't are actually boarded up. I don't even see any wires running to this house. It's not dark, but it's dusk, and there isn't a sign of any lights on. At this point, I'm starting to get pretty nervous. I'm a 5' 10" male, 180 pounds, not in any great shape, but I did take karate for 10 years, so I'm not helpless. But I do try to avoid any sort of confrontation I can, as I am mostly a pacifist. I'm not too concerned about getting robbed. No skin off my teeth, it's not my money. I mean, I would rather not get robbed, but I'm mostly worried about getting jumped or killed. It's a fairly safe area, but recently, there have been some rather unsavory people moving in from the city. A big spike in home invasions and robberies, but more worrying, a few stabbings and assaults. So, it's time to either nut up or shut up. I'm not just going to go charging in there like a fool, so I get out my phone and call the number they gave me when ordering. While I'm doing that, I'm also getting the pizza out and making sure to leave my door open. A running car, half in the road in an abandoned house with the door open looks suspicious, right? I figure if shit goes down, it might look out of place enough to make someone stop. Not that there is really any traffic this far down the road though. I'm starting to walk up to the house while the phone's ringing. It rings twice, and then an automated message comes on. It says something along the lines of, "This phone is associated with the internet texting app, one of the free ones you download, that lets you send free text from a different phone number over a data connection. I think it was haywire. We've had some issues with people using numbers from those services for pranks in the past. This is a huge red flag. My heart is now pounding in my throat, and my whole body is telling me to bail. I don't want to get a reputation for being a flaky bitch as a driver and lose any future delivery shifts, and that is why I hadn't bailed yet. So, I'm just standing there holding a pizza, looking at this house, but not wanting to venture around to the back of it. I'm hoping that the resident will look out the window and come out by the road to get their food. So I'm looking at the front windows checking for any signs of life. I see a blind go up on the one window next to the front door, and a really creepy looking guy with a hat pulled low and big sunglasses is looking out. Remember, he is in a completely dark house surrounded by trees at dusk. There is no reason for him to be wearing sunglasses. I also see what appears to be a big guy standing behind him in the room. This could have been anything though. When he sees me looking, he mouths something and darts away, presumably toward the allegedly broken front door. At this point, I nope the fuck out. I had stayed pretty close to my car, so it was only a few steps away, and I jumped into the driver's seat and threw the pizza into my passenger seat, something I would never usually do, since I'm really anal about keeping my car clean. I slam it into reverse before I get the clutch all the way in, so I grind my gears a little, again, something I never do. Without looking, I simultaneously slam and lock my door, and floor it backwards onto the main road, slipping my clutch horribly, but at this point I don't care. I don't want to fuck around and risk a stall. I didn't even check for cross traffic, really stupid on my part. I start to drive away and look back at the house. The screen door on the outside of the front door is now open, but the front door is still shut. The guy isn't out in the front yard yelling, "Wait, come back," or anything. He's just gone. So I pull over a little ways up the road to call back to the shop and tell them that I'm all good and I'll elaborate when I get back. The people never call back to inquire about their food. People usually call if their pizza is 15 minutes late, and these people never got it, so it's really strange they didn't call, pretty much confirming they were up to no good. After telling my coworkers about it, we concluded it was definitely a robbery at the very least. So we put the address and phone number on our no deliveries list and ate their pizza. I doubt I would have actually gotten murdered or anything. Robbed, with maybe a gun pulled, or a little roughing up, yes, but it was still very unnerving. That I easily could have gotten into some serious trouble by just doing my job. Especially if the idiots picked a slightly less abandoned house to set up at. Anyone who delivers pizza should be wary of situations like this. I looked into it, and apparently, it's a pretty common way to rob pizza guys. I'm pretty glad that we did not end up meeting. I attend a college that is located in one of the poorest cities in Northern California. The campus is relatively safe, since the school employs its own Department of Public Safety, but after the sun sets, it's usually a good call to remain indoors, because that's when the townies come out, and they tend to wander on the campus. About 2 years ago, I was living in an apartment complex on the main part of campus, and I still didn't have a car yet. It was the end of the fall semester, and I was the last person in my apartment of 3 girls to finish taking finals, so I was home alone, since my roommates had already gone home for winter break. I got back from taking my last exam, and followed my usual routine of collapsing into bed to cry and sleep off the effects of pulling an all-nighter. When I finally woke up, it was already past 10 p.m. and I was starving. Unfortunately, the student grocery store and cafeteria were closed for the day, and I had nothing in the apartment to eat and no car to get food elsewhere. I was woefully poking around the fridge in hopes that I would find something substantial to tide me over until morning, when I noticed a Domino's coupon that someone had stuck to the freezer. My stomach's pathetic cries for sustenance had been answered. I quickly decided that there was no shame in ordering a whole pizza, plus cinnamon sticks, for myself because 1. I was ravenous, and 2. The completion of finals demanded some sort of celebration, and 3. If anyone happened to ask, I was going to lie and say I was sharing with a friend or something. Anyway, I eagerly order up my feast for 1, and provide the cashier with my address, apartment, and cell number. I typically never give out my number to anyone, but I had ordered delivery from Domino's in the past, and I knew that they needed my number to call me once they were outside, because the drivers always got lost navigating through campus. About 20 minutes later, I got the call. My food was here. For reference, it was now close to midnight, and the campus was pretty much dead, since most students had gone home. The driver told me he was parked in front of a dorm building that was right across the street from my apartment. I hustled out and was going down the stairs when I spotted the delivery guy waiting outside of his car with my pizza. At this point, my sense of caution kicked in and I slowed my pace as my brain took in the fact that there were no other students out. The lighting was bad, and I was essentially walking up to a stranger in his car that still had its engine running. As I neared the bottom of the steps, I silently hoped that he would cross the street and approach me so that I wouldn't have to get near the car. Of course, that didn't happen. I made my way across the street and was finally able to get a good look at him. He was a relatively short, Hispanic guy, maybe 5'7" to 5'9", in his early 20s, and my nerves were getting bombarded by the creeper vibes he was giving off. I can only compare it to the vibe that you get when you're out clubbing and suddenly spot the guy lurking in the crowd, sporting the slick back ponytail, sunglasses, oversized shirt, and sagged pants combo, who just so happens to be headed in your direction. I did my best to appear calm and keep the mood light and friendly. He made some comments about how it was late and no one else was around, but I just signed a receipt as quickly as possible, gave him my thanks and an awkward smile, and hightailed it out of there as soon as he handed me my food. I could feel him watching me as I climbed the stairs back to my place. Once I got back into my apartment, I locked and chained up the door and sat down on the living room couch to calm myself. After a few moments, I shrugged off the situation and reasoned that it was just my paranoia and overactive imagination acting up again. I had just turned on the TV and was about to take my first bite of pizza when I got a text from an unknown number. It read, "You're hella sexy." I connected the dots and matched the text number to the call that I had received earlier from the pizza delivery guy. My initial reaction, of course, was shock, since nothing like this has ever happened to me before. But that eventually melted away into laughter and disbelief when I considered my appearance at the time. Like I had mentioned earlier, I had just woken up from my nap after taking the last of my finals. I was wearing a pair of raggedy sweatpants and a loose sweatshirt, and my hair was nappy and tied up in a messy ponytail. My face was probably greasier than the pizza I was eating, and to top it off, I had my glasses on. Definitely not a pretty picture, much less anything that could come close to resembling hella sexy. The next morning, I got a call from my boyfriend John, and I casually told him about the events that had transpired the previous evening. After sheepishly trying to defend my actions on the basis of poor judgment, caused by extreme hunger, and promising never to do that type of thing again, John convinced me that I should report it to the campus police as a precautionary measure. I gave them a call, and an officer stopped by my apartment a few hours later. I relayed my story. He took some pictures of the text message, and he wrote down the phone number. The officer then told me that he could contact the Domino's if I wanted him to, but that it would most likely result in the driver's termination. I was still relatively unfazed by the whole situation, and I told the officer that I just wanted to make sure that this creep never did this to any other girls on campus, but at the same time I didn't want him to lose his job. The officer then started asking me questions about how I felt after my encounter. Questions along the lines of, "Do you feel threatened? Do you feel safe in your apartment with the knowledge that he has both your phone number and your exact address?" If I wasn't scared before, I definitely was now, and during the course of my questioning, I had broken out in a cold sweat, and my traitorous imagination began conjuring up all sorts of dastardly situations that ended in my untimely demise. Obviously, I ended up giving the officer the go-ahead to pursue my case and contact Domino's. About a month later, while I was at home celebrating the holidays, I got a call from my boyfriend. I had left him the keys to my apartment so that he could store his bike there and crash in my room while I was away. He told me that he had stopped by my place, but that he couldn't get in because the keys weren't working. He also said that it looked like someone had broken in because there was some glass on the floor and a wooden board across my living room window. I was pretty upset because this was my first time hearing about it, so I called the school the next day to figure out what the hell had happened. Housing transferred my call to the public safety department, and the officer I spoke with was only able to tell me that, according to their records, a maintenance worker had called them 2 days after I had headed home to report my broken window. Public safety had responded by boarding up the window and changing the lock when they noticed it had been tampered with. I convinced the officer to let my boyfriend into my apartment so he could check if anything was stolen, and thankfully, nothing was. My gut tells me that it was the Domino's driver who did it. It was him who tried to pick my lock and then broke my window. It scares me even more now when I consider the fact that nothing had been stolen. My flat screen TV was right by the window that was broken, and my boyfriend's fancy road bike was sitting right there in the living room. Why didn't they steal anything? Does that mean his intentions were to break in and get his revenge on me, the girl that had cost him his job? Would this still have happened if I hadn't given the officer permission to pursue the case? I try not to spend too much time speculating about what the intentions were, but when I do, it still makes my heart race when I think about what could have happened if I had still been in my apartment at the time.